Hey guys, some stupid sketch show guy here with another prehistoric figure review, and today's prehistoric figure review is not on a classic Carnegie figure or something like that, but instead on a figure that was announced less than a month ago and already has a lot of people talking. It is PNSO's remastered Essien Spinosaurus. So let's get into it. So first up, as always, we are going to be reviewing the paint job. And I'd say the paint job is definitely one of the more overhyped parts of this figure. As predictably, PNSO makes the figure look a little better than it really is. The equivalent to a Big Mac in a commercial to a Big Mac in reality. Still great, but not as good as it really is. And I'd say that the worst part of the paint job is the snout. The snout kinda just looks kinda barf greenish. And, I get that they're trying to make the snout darker than the rest of the body, but it just doesn't look all that great. It just looks kinda eh. I'd say that the face paint, just in general, is the weakest part, but the rest of the paint job is significantly better, to say the least. But the face paint does kind of hold it back just a bit, as I mentioned before, the snout painting isn't super great, and neither is the teeth paint. If you can look up closely, this might just be a defect on mine, but mine isn't exactly the most polished, with some pretty obvious chipping on some of the teeth, like, this one right here. But, besides that, if we go into the rest of the figure, the rest of the paint looks pretty darn sweet. The spine looks kind of like a sun. It looks really nice. The black striping really also helps make those brighter colors pop out a lot more. The claws, those are well done. Those are very well done. And the overall orange shades and bright yellowish and orangish shades are just applied very, very well. The only other thing I should mention that doesn't exactly stand up to this kind of quality is these things, whatever you call those. Those just kind of look a little lazily applied to me, and kind of stick out as they're not nearly as detailed when it comes to their painting as, say, this. But besides that, most of the body looks really good, so I'd say it rounds out to a 7.5 out of 10. Next up is the pose, and the pose is very dynamic, especially in the face. The face is very clearly very turnt. And, normally I'd have an issue with this kind of posing, but I don't really mind it that much. Sure, it is a little annoying when you're trying to just make it look straight, but it's always kind of crooked in the neck area. But besides that, I'd say the pose really does look good, especially for photos. I've taken plenty of photos with this thing, and it's very good. I'd say that, in general, the twisty tail and the turnt face, they look great. They can be posed in multiple different ways and look really good. The only way that I think it just doesn't look that great is if you wanted it to look straight, because you can't. But I don't really mind it. I'd say that the pose looks nice. So I'd say my final rating would be a 7 out of 10. It's good. Then we go on to the figure's main selling point, and that is its scientific accuracy. How up-to-date is this figure? Well, I've asked a few people, and the general consensus is that this figure is the most up-to-date Spinosaurus figure ever made at the moment. Well, at least until Safari Limited comes out, but even that's up to debate. The main part of this figure that puts it as a 2020 up-to-date figure is, of course, this fabulous tail. This tail screams 2020 Spinosaurus. It's big, it's thick, and it's lovely. And the rest of the figure, at least to my knowledge, is also up-to-date with modern reconstructions of Spinosaurus. I'm not sure about the spine shape, but to my knowledge it's correct, and same with the face and the crests. And some people have argued that the figure is in the quadrupedal Spinosaurus pose, but the figure is only on the tips of its claws, so I'd say this is more of a balancing thing rather than supporting the outdated four-legged theory. So, I'd say a final consensus on accuracy is that it is very up-to-date, and I'll give it a 9 out of 10 for that. And lastly, we have the detail. And similar to the paint job, the detail was definitely a bit overhyped in the promo images, but still isn't so bad. The mouth detail is definitely a bit iffy in my opinion. The discoloring of these two things and the general lack of detail around that area isn't so great. You can barely see the tongue, so that's something. It just looks like it's painted pink, but that's more of a nitpick. The teeth aren't exactly applied that great. If you get rid of the paint chips, they don't look so bad, but if you include them, they really don't look good. And as you move up into the face, Well, the face doesn't look so bad. It isn't so great up in the front, but the detail right around here is pretty darn good. As you can see, every single individually sculpted scale. And you can safely say that about the rest of the figure, and then some. As the rest of the figure is purely sculpted scales and is amazing. Especially this part. This part is truly a masterpiece. The spine is awesome. And the rest of the body is still pretty good too. As you can see, many great scales, some little stretches of muscle, and some pretty well applied claws, although those aren't exactly as well applied. Overall, just amazing detail all around. Amazing scales, especially when you move down to the tail. Well, except for this part. This part is definitely not my favorite, mainly due to the paint. It's just not that well done. But down here, yes, please. This part, the tail, the main part of the tail, except for the top part, is just awesome. It just all adds up to a very great, well-sculpted figure, and I'd say that gives it a good 8 out of 10 for me. So now time for the consensus. The paint and the detail, while still good, is a bit overhyped. The pose is very dynamic, but in a surprisingly good way, and the figure is incredibly up to date, and is a great figure for anyone who loves scientifically accurate figures. And, as my final rating, I will give this figure an 8 out of 10, just barely getting it into the sketchy seal of approval. Because this figure does deserve it. Even if it does have a few shortcomings that are a little underwhelming, I say this figure still barely cuts it as a sketchy seal of approval. I approve this figure, and it's great. Go buy it, please. Hope you guys enjoyed this prehistoric figure review. Comment down what figures I should review next, and see you guys next time.